Top 10 Movies That Changed Hollywood Forever. If you've been paying attention to all the sequels, reboots, and IP properties populating theaters these days, you'd be forgiven for believing that. With all the westerns, musicals, and book adaptations thrown at them, people thought Hollywood was out of ideas even before the era of superheroes and CG robots. So there have been complaints of a creative well gone dry and audiences begging for more unique films for as long as Hollywood has existed. Before we continue, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so that you can be updated by my new videos. But all hope is not lost. Despite the fact that Hollywood is notorious for rehashing the same concepts over and over until viewer weariness sets in, there have been original films that have changed the game so drastically that every subsequent picture owes a piece of its DNA to that game changer. In this video, we present the 10 films that were so unique, unexpected, and spectacularly successful at what they set out to do that they forever changed Hollywood and movie history. Number 10, The Breakfast Club. Assume you're making a coming-of-age film. You want to stand out from the crowd while also turning the genre on its head. You want recognized characters, but at the end of the film, those characters must have grown and broken out of their boxes. You want a memorable scene or two set to an era-appropriate song that will ideally become a classic. Essentially, you want to be a member of the Breakfast Club. No other John Hughes film, before or after The Breakfast Club, has brilliantly captured the uneasy nostalgia of growing up and the feelings of high school. And every film that has come after it understands this, which is why you can't have a coming-of-age film without referencing The Breakfast Club in some way, otherwise, you're just stealing. If you're The Breakfast Club, every movie wants to be you, and as a consequence, every film since The Breakfast Club has The Breakfast Club firmly etched in its DNA, and as a result, everyone who's ever watched a film after 1985 has The Breakfast Club deeply embedded in their DNA. But there's no way we'd have it any other way. Number 9, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is mainly a subtitled foreign film with apes as the main characters and a few English-speaking humans as extras. Its ambition is out of this world, its risk-taking should be admired in the present Hollywood climate, its storytelling is deep and layered, and yet it was critically lauded and made enough money at the box office to build all the fantastic monkey treehouses anyone could possibly desire. Sure, Dawn is a tentpole film, the 8th in the series, and one might argue that the brand familiarity alone allowed director Matt Reeves to create something exceptional without the studio being too concerned. That, however, would be undervaluing Dawn of the Planet of the Apes' strangeness. Number 8, The Graduate. Here's something you probably didn't know about The Graduate. It's the 21st highest-grossing film of all time, adjusted for inflation. That puts Dustin Hoffman 6 spots ahead of The Avengers, implying that more people wanted to see him mope around and ponder his seduction than see Iron Man beat the heck out of Thor. By the way, there's a strong possibility The Avengers would never have happened if it hadn't been for The Graduate. Aside from launching the career of Dustin Hoffman, who has been a force in Hollywood for over 5 decades, The Graduate and director Mike Nichols usher in a new age of auteur-driven cinema, in which each picture is more personal and unique than the one before it. Number 7, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into a film based on a children's book and set in a magical fantasy realm, let alone expanding the plot over 8 films, would have been crazier than whatever the rules of Quidditch must be before Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And yet, here we are in 2015, with young adult novel adaptations being among of the highest-grossing films of all time, and every Hollywood executive yearning that witchcraft would disclose the source of the next Harry Potter series. After Harry Potter, multi-part franchises became the norm rather than the exception, and it's now almost expected to split a franchise's last installment into 2 films, whether the script calls for it or not. Number 6, Knocked Up.
And she busts your balls because you're a little bitch.
The 40-year-old virgin paved the way for Knocked Up, but when the 2 films are compared, the 40-year-old virgin appears to be a cave painting with flashes of greatness, whereas Knocked Up appears to be an Italian Renaissance painting with all the elements of modern art that would come to define everything that came after it. Judd Apatow cemented his spot in American cinema with Knocked Up, ushering in a new era of R-rated comedic box office hits. Knocked Up solidified everything we've come to expect from comedies with Seth Rogen and all of his Apatowian regulars in tow, and it did it with a low-concept plot that highlighted the humor in everything, and nothing. Number 5, Jaws. Nothing would ever be the same after Jaws. Jaws, the first blockbuster, heralded a new era of gigantic smashes that would rule the box office and drive all other films scurrying for the sticky flooring of the local arthouse cinema. Jaws' winning formula made everything that came after it look dull in the salty mist of time, with Spielberg's still perfect balance of deep feeling, fascinating characters, and suspense to end all suspense. Sure, Jaws is responsible for all of today's blockbusters, from Avengers to Transformers, but most of them are poor imitations of the pacing and character development that made Jaws such a force to be reckoned with. Number 4, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. The Lord of the Rings trilogy received 3 Academy Award nominations. Allow that to sink in. The Return of the King, the final installment, received 11 Academy Awards, tying Ben-Hur and Titanic for the most victories ever for a film. Sean Astin and Orcs and Hobbits and Rings earned Academy Awards for this trilogy. That's why it forever revolutionized Hollywood's image of fantasy films and what constitutes a mainstream smash. When filming on the trilogy began, director Peter Jackson embarked on one of the most ambitious film projects ever, with the series spanning 8 years and all 3 films being shot at the same time. Nothing about The Lord of the Rings should have come together. It's based on a series of fantasy books from the 1950s that are, once again, about a bunch of little guys with big hairy feet and a ring, not to mention that the technology they had to pull this story off back in 2001 was basically just a CRT monitor and a scientific calculator. But it did. Number 3, Spider-Man. Every age has a favorite version of Spider-Man, whether it's the poorly drawn cartoon Spider-Man from 1967, the frighteningly muscular cartoon Spider-Man from 1994, or the strangely too anime but still great spectacular Spider-Man from 2008. But, regardless of your generation or which cartoon Spider-Man you claim as your own, one thing is certain: we all gathered together, put our differences aside, and enjoyed the hell out of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, and so began a revolution. Hollywood caught the superhero bug like a spider laying hundreds of eggs, and began hatching everything it could as quickly as audiences could tolerate. Many films flopped in the years after Spider-Man, including Daredevil, The Hulk, and Catwoman, but others thrived and became franchises that continue to this day. Number 2, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Judgment is the second installment of the Terminator franchise. Day didn't merely change sequel naming conventions by putting a comma and a meaningless subtitle after the number 2. Its far greater triumph is that it was the first film to use CGI extensively, paving the way for every mind-numbing explosion and city-crumbling sequence that we see in movies today. Though the renowned liquid metal T-1000 scene may get all the attention, ILM spent 10 months and $5 million on all the effects, which took 35 people to finish. T2 also proves that sequels to hit films aren't merely a cash grab, but a very lucrative cash grab that occasionally pays off with a film that is better appreciated than its predecessor. Number 1, Toy Story. Toy Story was the first computer-generated animation film. Its debut 20 years ago ushered in a paradigm change in Hollywood, appending institutions and flipping genres on their heads. Not only did Toy Story put an end to hand-drawn animated films, which had effectively begun the cinema industry, but it also put an end to musicals, princess stories, and, Pixar would be selling computers if IT wasn't for it. Pixar sparked a revolution and churned out one modern masterpiece after another the moment it was able to make viewers fall in love with Woody, a mean-spirited anti-hero, and Buzz, an ignorant ass. I hoped you find this video helpful. If you liked the video, do like and subscribe as it really helps our channel, and do remember to give your feedback in the comments below. See you in the next video with some more interesting topics and facts.